When one listens carefully, to the parables of the Lord, one notices things that at first hearing might escape the notice. The fact that it was first of all a priest, then a Levite, who just saw him and passed by, not anywhere but on the other side of the road, is already significant. It's a little dig, not at all politically correct at the time. But then this plethora of details with the Samaritan is very moving. It's deliberate. It's showing the fundamental difference in attitude. Look what he does. He stops, goes over, saves him from probable death, wasting wine and oil, precious, taking care physically of him, rather like a Mother Teresa of our time. Then puts him on his own mount, so he walks in the heat, and takes him to the equivalent of a clinic or a hospital, anywhere where they can find help. And it doesn't stop there. He promises that he'll cover all the expenses and come back the next day, whenever more is needed. Now, this is about gratuity, extra bits. And it's a deliberate contrast to what the lawyer, the expert in the law, the scribe, is coming out with. He's got the answer right, actually. He takes up the big commandments, the vertical and the horizontal. So he's got that right, and the Lord knows he's going to get it right. He doesn't bother answering. What do you read? But then the shock comes. He wasn't at all expecting this different attitude. In a land of faith, it happens in most Catholic lands, actually. If one isn't careful, because of the great pervasive nature of our faith in every stratum of life and society, one does not go into a fundamental change of attitude quite often. Proof. Good Catholics at the driving wheel. Choice expressions, use of the horn. That's the tip of the iceberg. Is it evangelical? If the case were drawn up against us with regard to our claim of being a Christian, would there be enough evidence to convict us? Too much of the same thing. Now, actually, it can apply to us also. For instance, the very fact of not seeing how un-evangelical is the very act of allowing swear words into the house, for instance, through opening a screen or a channel which will automatically contain them and block grace out, is an important choice. God is not reigning at that point in our home. Someone else is having invitation actually to enter and be heard and become what? The norm. Do you know that in most Catholic lands, unfortunately, there is one very rarely corrected element of discontinuity. I mean with grace, prayer, and the presence of God. It's what goes on in never ever handled words. Many Catholic lands have inbuilt in their vocabulary the equivalent of "oh God." Why should it happen a lot in Catholic lands, and traditionally fairly evangelical Protestants would not tolerate it? Why should that be the case? Why do we think that it's not important? Everyone says such and such. And as time goes on, certain one-time strong swear words get downgraded and get used by clergy. Listen to them. There are two fundamental issues here. One is bringing God into it, and showing by that fact that we're not living, consciously at least, fully, our engagement with Jesus, who is hurt by it. Therefore, anything pertaining to the sacred should never be brought in as a punctuation mark. But the other too is unpleasant, displeasing to our guardian angel, and should never be brought in. Anything with sexual innuendo, anything which is bringing down the sacred of that realm, should not be used in any shape or form out of context. But there are many that have lost their force because we're not aware of what they mean. The classic one, you know what I mean, actually is a holy expression and therefore is blasphemous. It comes from by Our Lady. So even if we don't know what we're saying, we're bringing her into it each time. She knows. But why should we have to be like everyone else and show we're virile? We haven't really changed our attitude. And this actually can impinge even on our faith. The norm is the important thing that has to happen over the weekend. And so if we're not careful, we can sideline this moment, fit it in. The Holy Eucharist fits in well when we have several celebrations, so that the big bit can happen in the middle. I want to zoom in to, however, one element which is pervading now in a new way, the dumbing down of the difference between the Christian engagement and what's out there. Let's get this straight. Because in procreation, man is working hand in hand with the Blessed Trinity, that sacred domain is under his direct authority. So, the optic is to collaborate with him in populating heaven with new souls, new angels for glory everlasting. He therefore knows how this is to be executed. Anything which is dumbing this down in the realm of the normalization of abuse of that sacred sphere of life, for instance, blessed unions between partners of the same sex, completely haywire with regard to the order in creation. Or, now this is very delicate, the presumption that bit by bit one can tolerate this element of sacred human activity outside, I say the sacramental, the heavenly sealed bond, is also something which needs to be looked at carefully. Why? We are making almost fun of the millions of faithful spouses who over the centuries have, even though been left and abandoned, badly treated, have known that they were actually nevertheless bound sacramentally to only one person. We can't do that. They also have their dignity. This week, I was deeply moved, unexpectedly. We were in the sacristy in a church which is very dear because of its memories, St. David's Cathedral in Wales, where I used to pray as a schoolboy. And what marched in to the sacristy as we were vesting for the Welsh Mass with our bishops? The two newly ordained, and a third heading for a subdiaconate. One was a very young man, I think born a Catholic, very orthodox and faithful. Notice who persevered. The other had just the other day, a few days ago, been ordained, having left the Anglican communion, intuiting where the truth was. The third that came in was not yet ordained, but very much desirous of being, and was already in minor orders, some of them, studying in the old rite in the fraternity of St. Peter. But not that long ago he was studying Hebrew and Arabic in Cambridge, attending the Anglican liturgy, High Church I believe, and eventually realized that he was adoring, by idolatry, a piece of bread. It made no difference what his bishop was wearing. He was not even a priest. So, abandoning his whole background, a Welsh-speaking Anglican, he came over. But did not go to the local seminary, or one in London or in Rome. He went to this. Why? Because of the clear-mindedness that he had. He was not going to have anything less than before with regard to reverence and verticality. The instinct was, I'll be safe only there. Very interesting. Coming back to Ireland, listening to one or the other, I've been picking up a lot of priestly pain. There are young priests around right now in serious difficulty. Some are not long ordained, and it's very, very painful to see. And I was talking this morning to my good parish priest after my confession, saying these need fellowship. And he said, that's right. If only people opened up. The demon is attacking the priesthood, and he's attacking those who will be a nuisance to him, brilliant young men. And I just finished with this. Long ago, I was talking to a friend of mine who also became a Catholic. He was a Welsh Baptist. He's now an Orbiting, heading for ordination. And he was telling me what he had heard from talking to the bishops, because he'd worked for a long time as factotum in Westminster Cathedral. And he said this in Welsh. They won't admit it, but they know it. The renewal with regard to recruitment in the new rite has failed. They know, but they won't say it. It's in the classical families. The vocations are still coming, and coming strongly. What does that tell you? I'll tell you what it means. It means that God is very generous in blessing what will come back to him in honour and glory under his terms. It's true in the priesthood, in vocation, it's true also in marriage. God is not free to bless sin, or even things which are watered down and against his divine will. Do things under his terms, and he'll repay 100-fold. So what we need is a change of